So welcome to another installment of the On the Water podcast. We got Captain Jack Patrican, right?
Yeah,
is that how you say it?
Nailed it.
Yep, from Time Flies Charters, Wicked Tuna, right? You've done that, and you also do a lot of commercial fishing. So, and obviously we got Jimmy here too, who's not going to say anything for the first 10 seconds, but we just started talking about some of the cool stuff you've experienced on the commercial side of things. What kind of commercial fishing represents the non-sport fishing that you do?
Yeah, so 12 months out of the year, commercial fishing, and it's just kind of a way to make money doing what I love. So it depends on the season. In the springtime, we start off by mackerel fishing. It goes into striped bass, and then charters gets mixed into the summertime. Then we do wicked tuna, which kind of ends up being like a paid vacation, really, which is awesome. Just blessed to be able to do it and have fun every day out there. But then we commercial tuna and mackerel right through December, and then after December I jump on a dragger and we go out there and ground fish, tow around a big net, cod, haddock, pollock, redfish, halibut, every type of flounder, blackback, yellowtail, dabs, fluke, you name it. And then after that, April 1st, we begin scallops, Northern Gulf of Maine scallop season, which we're just about to get into. And then I jump back on my boat and start the cycle all over again.
So a lot of rhythms to that season.
So Gloucester, born and bred?
I live in Gloucester now. I'm originally from Boxford, so I grew up in the woods. My family, Patricans are from Gloucester and Essex, and once I graduated college and kind of came back, it was just a calling. So I'm happy I ended up there because it's a great little town.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to St. Mary's College in Maryland.
Nice.
I was always a lacrosse player growing up and got recruited to play down there. It was good Division III lacrosse, right on the water on the Chesapeake Bay, so you can kind of imagine why I picked to go there. I got to striped bass fish and weak fish and all that and play lacrosse on the side. So
that's pretty awesome. What'd you go to school for?
I went to school for economics.
Okay.
Yeah, so, it's cool to be able to use a degree now. I mean, a lot of people get degrees and they never use them. Yeah. And I kind of started my own business, charters, commercial fishing, pretty much any way you can make money fishing. I've kind of, got my hand in it. Yeah. But, just great having an economics background, how to, deal with your money, run a business, just general economics is great to have.
That side of the working in the fishing industry, especially somebody like you who's doing a bunch of different fishing, the management, the money management of the whole thing is, there's so much, the costs that go into every trip and, the materials, the fuel, all the things like that. You really do have to have a good head on keeping the books straight, man.
It's amazing. I got my little QuickBooks account and everything's on one credit card, try to make it easy. And, these days with permits and insurance and dock fees and, it adds up. So it's not easy to be able to, to make a living doing it. But if you can, it's one of the, best gifts in life to do what you love.
That's true. That's got to give you a big leg up. I'd imagine that, at that level of education, with a focus on economics, that probably gives you a huge advantage that, makes navigating that whole, fisheries dynamic and that livelihood a little bit more manageable. It's not an easy living to begin with, I'd imagine.
No, you got to love it. I mean, there's so many people that I miss out on a lot of stuff. I mean, getting up early every day, means you're not staying up late. So, it's I was lucky to grow up lobstering. In high school, that's how I, kind of got into commercial fishing. Yeah. And that's where the work ethic came. Good friend Dave LaRosa out of South Boston, jumped on with him, and that's where I really really learn the work ethic of fishing, of getting up every day, 2 a.m., getting down to the boat, going fishing for 12 hours, coming back. And, you got to take care of your body and, you got to learn to do stuff. You got laundry, you got all sorts of other stuff where you only got a couple hours in the day to get it done before you're, rinsing and repeating. But, it's been fun.
Now, is fishing a family business?
No. I mean, my dad, he was probably, I got to credit him getting me into it as a kid, just always being on around a boat and, fishing here and there. And my dad loves to fish, but, he's kind of in a different realm. So, like I said, I went to college and, you had that kind of gap after college where, you might have a time to, kind of focus on what you want to do. And, I jumped in it, charters, commercial fishing, and, it's just see how long I'd last in it. And then Wicked Tuna came, and then I kind of got into my realm of commercial fishing, and the rest is history.
So you came into Wicked Tuna at season 10, right?
Season 9, actually. So it was funny. The whole story of Wicked Tuna, I was at a Third Eye Blind concert with my family and my girlfriend in Boston. I got a call from Sam Law, who was the captain of the Kraken. And he auditioned for the show season 9, and out of 150 boats, they picked, him, one of 3. It was Sam Law on the Kraken, Bob Cook on the Fat Tuna, and it was Captain Charlie on the Wasabi. So I'm at a Third Eye Blind concert, and I get a call from Sam Law. Never met him in person. He's just like, "Hey, I got on Wicked Tuna. You want to be my mate?" And I'm like, and this is like a month before we start filming. I got charters booked and everything. And I just said, "Hey, why not?" So I did it with him season 9. And the next year, I got a call and said, "Hey, I heard you got a center console. How would you like to go and do it on your own?" And I said, "Yeah." So the whole kind of mesh of how things happen, it was just kind of stars aligned and, blessed because of it.
That's cool.
So where was the relationship where, Sam, right, the Kraken captain was like, I'm reaching out to this kid to be my mate. Like,
yeah, no, it's a good question. So the catch of Wicked Tuna is you got to fish out of Gloucester. Mm-hmm. So it's great tuna fishermen everywhere, from Maine all the way down to the Cape and beyond. But, Wicked Tuna, you got to fish out of Gloucester. That means you have to go to the Gloucester spots. You got to fish Southern Jeffreys, you got to fish Stellwagen, because, you might be able to run to Chatham a couple times during the season. But, when you get 30 knots of wind and you got to go film a show, you got to know the local spots. So
it's like a 100-mile run to get to the Regal Sword.
Yeah. Don't even get me started on that. But Sam basically was like, "Hey, I need a mate," and he wanted somebody who was kind of familiar with Gloucester, and it was actually Bob Cook on the Fat Tuna that hooked us up together. And Bob's a great guy and just had a sense of like, hey, Jack and Sam can fish well together, and just got tossed in there and said, "Hey, let's do it. It'll be fun," and it was a great time.
Now, how long had you been tuna fishing at that point?
I had probably been tuna fishing, I don't know, seriously since like maybe 2010, 2011, so not very long. I grew up fishing, doing charters, Captain Mark, North Shore Charters out of Beverly. I kind of credit him to, teaching me how to fish and the ropes of the charter business into commercial tuna fishing. He was, one of the guys that was doing both. If he had charters on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, he'd run those. But then, on the weekday where he had nothing to do, you just go commercial fishing. So, fishing with Captain Mark growing up out of Beverly, that's really where I kind of got into, that side of tuna fishing. And, once I was able to kind of get on my boat, it was just something I did for fun. But, at the end of the day, if you can go out and even if you make $1,000 doing what you love and you're a kid where you're not paying, mortgages and this and that, I mean, hey, I loved it. I loved every bit of it. So how did your love affair with fishing start? You mentioned your dad introduced you to it. Like, what was that fishing like, fishing with your dad growing up? Yeah, growing up, a lot of it was Martha's Vineyard. Down this way, we go to Martha's Vineyard every summer, and I can just remember just living on the beach when we went down there as a kid. I mean, my parents would wake up, I wouldn't be in my bed, and they'd be like, "Where is he?" And I'd be down in the water, casting a rod. That was one of my earliest fishing memories. Is fishing on the beach by myself. Casted a bottom line out with one of those pyramid sinkers. Mm-hmm. Thing was snagged right in front of me. I didn't know. Gave it a yank back, and the thing went right through my lip, cracked my tooth, got stitches, and that was one of the first fishing memories I have, and from then I was hooked. I loved it.
So fishing punched you in the mouth, and you're like, "This is awesome. I need more of this."
Yeah. It made me feel alive, and I just love the grit, and I love I've always loved being outside, so I love the mix of being able to get up early, spend the time outside, and that fresh air, and you just get to go offshore and just kind of put everything aside for a day, which is nice. it's really nice to have that piece.
It's an easy activity to kind of just like, lose yourself in and be a happy idiot out there. So you got into it that way, and then, your family always had a boat and you did some fishing, and then you obviously had some mentors along the way on the lobster and with the commercial side, the charter fishing. Do you remember your first time ever venturing offshore into tuna waters, and what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, my first time going off into tuna waters would probably be, going out with Captain Mark Kuskalis out of Beverly there. And yeah, I think it was right around 4th of July. We went out there. There was 1 million boats. And I remember we put a bait out, and it was one of those times, you hear it all the time, where like someone goes tuna fishing for the first time and they hook up instantly. And it's like, from that moment, it's like, you're all done, Yeah. It's like, good luck. So yeah, that was probably one of my first earliest memories of going out catching a big giant like that. We actually caught it on a 50, on a stand-up Shimano TLD 50. So, we were just out there just having a fun time, and that fun kind of turned more into a passion, and then into a business and a job.
So for you, did you first pivot into doing some charter fishing, and that first boat that you charter fished on, what is it, the boat you run now?
Yeah. So that was how I got my original transition into it, was doing charters, and and then I kind of figured out up here the charter season's small. It's really short, and I'm just one of those guys that I want to go fishing every day. So first it transitioned into doing charters into spring into the summer, and then in the fall. I mean, nobody wants to go fishing on a center console in the fall. Even if I paid somebody to go, they probably wouldn't go. It's not fun. Yeah. So I kind of realized that it wasn't like a full-time job, and I had to figure out some way to fill in that time, that I wasn't doing charters. So that's where commercial fishing came in. So, I'd be on other people's boats, and then I'd, once I was able to, put some permits on my boat, I'd, go do commercial striped bass and tuna and charters. And then, like I said, I had to find a way to, keep myself busy so that I could run charters in the summertime, because I mean, if you didn't have enough to do and, you're just doing summertime, I mean, how are you going to make it? Then I'd have to go get a desk job, and so I was looking for any way I could just to keep myself
stay on the water.
Yeah, just stay on the water. Anything I could do. It didn't matter what fishery it was. If it was lobster and scallop, dry, it didn't matter. It was just, if I could go out and make some money, and it would keep me fishing. I mean, that's what I do.
Now, the non-rod and reel commercial fishing you do, which is your favorite?
I'd probably say dragging.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what's going to come up in that net. Fishing with Captain Joe Jurek out of Gloucester, Mystique Lady. I was lucky to get on that boat. I mean, it was always one of those boats where you see coming in and there's birds following, and he's unloading for 3 hours at the dock. And I remember going by and be like, wow, I gotta get on that boat. And yeah, I mean, if you want something, go out and grab it. And I'd literally just asked him one day, friend of a friend, say, hey, if you need a guy, I'll go fishing. And not everybody wants to go dragging in January in a snowstorm. So he said, yeah, give this kid a chance. And then here I am. I've done, this will be the third winter I've worked for Joe, and it's fun.
Is there a big divide from the guys that go out there and really, hammer, and the guys that are like, I'd never want to fish on that boat, that guy's always struggling? Is there a big, I mean, I guess that probably weeds those guys out.
Yeah,
naturally, but
big time. Like, there are boats you want to be on, and there are boats that you don't want to be on. I mean, especially dragging. I mean, you make one small move, you catch a big rock or something like that, and next thing, the time that you could be fishing and making money, you're losing money. Trying to get that rock out or fixing up the mended net. So, getting on a boat that catches fish and makes money is sought after, and it weeds out people pretty fast.
Yeah.
You could be put out of one day. You could put out of business in one day in that business.
Really?
With quota, say you only have 1,000 pounds of cod, you go and you make a big set, you hit a spawning mass of cod, you get 10,000 pounds, and all of a sudden you have to buy that 10,000 pounds from the government at a premium. And, so you're losing money on all that fish. And, some guys, if you're just scraping by, I mean, it's happened. And yeah, you could be put out of business in one day there, bad set.
So navigating those those quotas, you go out and like, hey, we're targeting this species. How hard is it to kind of differentiate between, being efficient and productive with the quota you have, and potentially putting yourself in that situation?
It's tough. I mean, these guys, Captain Joe that I fish with, I mean, he's one of the best that does it, and you have to know where those fish are and what you're setting on. So you got to know that, in the wintertime on hard bottom up high on shoal, there's probably going to be more cod there. And those haddock, they're spawning, they're going to want to be in the deep, muddy waters. So, if you're trying to catch haddock, you got to stay away from those high shoal, rocky areas, or else you're going to catch too much cod. And then, and vice versa, if you don't have a lot of haddock quota and you want to catch cod, I mean, you don't want to be in that deep water because, you're just going to load up with haddock. And so, these guys are very, very good at knowing where these fish are going to be, what type of bottom they want to be on, and catching them. It's not easy. And these guys, they're true masters at their craft.
And now a note from one of our sponsors who are literally the reason we're able to do this podcast.
This episode of the On the Water podcast is sponsored by our friends at Old Town Canoe and Kayak. I love kayak fishing, and to be honest, there's no place in the world that I would rather be than fishing on my Old Town big water pedal kayak. I do all kinds of fishing on my Old Town. In early spring, I'm out on the small ponds fishing for largemouth bass and pickerel. By May, I'm out every morning at first light, gliding along in the harbors and salt ponds, throwing topwater lures at freshly arrived stripers. And then one thing I can't wait for is when the bluefish show up in spring on the sand flats here on Cape Cod. These fish tend to be pretty good sized, 8 to 10 pounders, and they come into just 3 to 4 feet of water, swimming right below the surface. In the Old Town big water, it's stable enough that I can stand up and spot them, and then I sight cast to them, I throw flies to them. The blues can be incredibly spooky, and I don't even know if there's another way that you could get so close to them and do that kind of fishing without being in a kayak. The Old Town Sportsman lineup includes paddle, pedal, and power-driven kayaks in a range of sizes and setups, including Old Town's newest kayak, the ePDL Plus. Whether you're new to kayak fishing and on your way to becoming completely addicted like I am, or you're already in love with kayak fishing and just looking for your next vessel, Old Town has a kayak that will fit your fishing.
You mentioned hanging a rock, and that's funny. Like, you talk to some of the old timers, the recreational fishermen, where they would have good friends who were in the commercial fishing fleet, and they would want their hang logs. They would want to know where they lost gear, where they wouldn't drag, because that's where the structure was. That's where they wanted to go wreck fish. So that's how they pieced it together back before any of the, you had the widespread charts we have now that are real detailed. So
what are some of the surprises I'm assuming you mainly fish the Gulf of Maine when you're dragging?
Yeah, it's Gulf of Maine, Mass Bay.
Yeah.
We're inshore. We're day trips. So,
okay.
The way that Joe does it is really smart. So you have all these big boats that, 100-foot boats, and they go out for 2, 3, sometimes 5 days at a time. So there's a lag in when they're offloading. Mm-hmm. And, the way, the market price goes up and down. If there's 50,000 pounds of haddock that comes in a day, obviously supply and demand, that price is going to shoot down. So, if you can land on some of those days that the big boats aren't landing on, then, you get a better price. So, we're day trip fishermen, maybe 24, 30 hours would be our longest. But yeah, for the most part, we're fishing right out front, the areas that we know, and, the fish are going to be in that general area, and it's just a matter of, stumbling around till you find them.
We were talking a little bit before this, people run into all kinds of surprises there. You had mentioned Jeffrey's Ledge produced a golden tilefish.
Yeah, it's changing, man. When I first started getting into it, fishing up here, bottom fishing, cod, haddock, all that stuff, we never saw scup, black sea bass, fluke, anything like that. And nowadays, in the middle of the winter on Northern Jeffreys, we see fluke, scup, black sea bass regularly.
Wow.
And,
that's so weird.
Another boat that's in the industry, just like you said, golden tilefish, just right in Jeffrey's Ledge. So
a couple 100 feet of water. That's insane. Now, on the fluke and sea bass, that kind of winter out there, are they like genuinely on the smaller spectrum of that fish's size, or are there like big ones?
They're the big ones.
Really?
Yeah, so we don't see too many of the small ones. I don't think they're necessarily like, breeding up here yet.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like they're just migrating north. And it's, in my opinion, it's a southeast wind. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it would never blow southeast, 70 knots in the wintertime. And over these past 2 years, we'd have these southeasters where it's actually, common now for it to blow 65, 70 knots out of the southeast. So instead of, keeping all that stuff down there, it's pushing stuff up. So that's how I see it.
Really? Now, halibut. Talk to me about halibut.
Everyone wants to know about
Everybody
halibut.
wants to know about halibut.
It's like at the very top, I don't know, northeast cobia, north Atlantic halibut, but on this side of the Atlantic, like that is,
that's the unicorn.
Yeah.
The holy grail for
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the biggest, baddest fish out there. I mean, when you think about it, they get enormous, and you hook one of those things, and you're in for a battle. Most people don't realize if you catch a big halibut and you don't have a harpoon on the boat, you're probably not going to get them, because when they see that surface, it's something like you've never seen before. So you hear these horror stories where these guys get 100-pound halibut right at the boat and they can't get them. So that's a pro tip, is if you get a harpoon rigged on board. But they're making a comeback, man. I mean, we're fishing right out front of Gloucester, Jeffrey's Ledge, and we've probably caught 50, 60, 70 of them this year. And the keeper size is 41 inches, and they're all right below that. 35, 38 inches. The cool thing about halibut is they're always in pairs. So if you catch a halibut, say you catch a 40-incher halibut, more often than not, there is another exact cookie cutter 40-incher right in the same vicinity of it.
Really?
So, I mean, if we catch one halibut in the dredge or in the net, there'll usually be the same one right next to them there.
Wow.
So if you ever catch a big halibut, you'd be like, oh, that's a 1 in a million. I'll never catch another one. Put another rod down as quick as you can, because more often than not, he's got a buddy they pair up for life. So,
wow.
There's
I didn't
always
know
another
that.
one hanging around, and it's always the same exact size. It's weird.
So I wonder, you mentioned a lot of them are kind of in that high 30-inch range. I wonder if there was like a good year class, a really productive spawn. I don't know how fast they grow, but whenever, that produced that, and maybe they're kind of working their way up.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, back in the day, 70s, 80s, into the 90s, that's what, is Halibut Point in Rockport. It's named after it. You'd have halibut, you guys would catch them on dories, frickin', right off the coast. And sadly, they were wiped to, near extinction, similar to, the Atlantic salmon, where, they were prevalent and slowly they dropped off. And, if they put measures on them, now it's one fish per trip. So there's none of those big, halibut, slaying days. Besides what, up in Maine, they have a, artesian, handline fishery, longline bottom fishery that they catch them on up there. But they're making a comeback, and they grow slow. So for halibut to get to 100 pounds, I'm not sure exactly how long, but it's going to take a while, because it's.
So you've seen a mix of, underclassmen and some legal fish with more regularity, you'd say, now than 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, for sure. 5-10 years ago, I didn't, maybe if I saw 1 or 2 halibut a year, that would be a big thing. And now they're coming a little bit more prevalent,
So if somebody was trying to piece it together without no numbers, obviously, what type of bottom and what depth range would give you your best shot at that one? Let's say in like the summertime fishing season, if that's even an option.
Yeah, summertime, fishing season is, find a hole, deep water. Every time we catch them, we're in 80 fathoms. So we're fishing deep water, and they want to be around some sort of structure. So deep holes with a little bit of structure on them. In the summertime, if you run offshore out to Fipponese and Cash's Ledge, you can catch them out there. Definitely a little easier than you could catch them inshore. But yeah, deep holes and rocky bottom.
Yeah. Where do they winter?
I think they come closer in the wintertime.
Okay.
That's why we're catching them, just 5-6 miles off the shore in January, February, into March. In the summertime, I'm back on the other boat and I'm not dragging as much. But, it seems like they, when the landings are coming in, when guys are catching them, it's in the wintertime. So
that's pretty wild.
Speaking to the other boat, so in the summer, what boat do you run? What's your center console?
Yeah, so center console is it's a 32-foot Everglades. Hell of a boat. It's just this will be 10 years of commercial fishing abuse. And when you think of an Everglades, you don't usually, it wouldn't be in that class of like a commercial fishing boat. But you wouldn't believe, I still get people who ask me if the boat's new.
Yeah.
And 10 years of,
abuse.
You're talking about those Chatham trips. Going, 90 miles and 4 or 5 footers and do that a couple years. I think any regular boat would, have some screws loose and, some cracks in the fiberglass and whatnot. And, the Everglades, the thing is, it's a battleship.
That's awesome. I've heard a lot of good things about those boats. Specifically, like true to their DNA, they've always been kind of that brand that gives you an amazing rough riding boat. I mean, you've probably had it in some shit. Like, how does that thing handle the seas, and what are your limitations? Usually a lot of center consoles are like, we got to slow down. Like, how do you run your boat when you're in those 4 to 5 footers, and what do you get out of it that you think is rare in that, in that class of boat?
I mean, it's how they're built. I mean, the ram cap process that they have it just makes the thing indestructible. I mean, they're unsinkable, indestructible, and you're saying going through rough weather. I mean, that boat will go through 20 knots through just about anything.
Really?
We're lucky we have a pilot house on there, and it's because we'll fish into November up here, and once we close that pilot house door, it will run through anything. We everything gets tied on, and you are just. It'll go through just about anything. Speaking of that, I mean, we've never missed a day of filming in. All the years that we've done the show, there's never been a day we've taken off of weather. So any day that one of those big 46 Muscle Ridge or 44 Calvin Beal, some of these other guys on the show, anything that those guys can go out there, we can be right there next to them. And not only that, we can beat them out there and come back quicker. So
you think that gives you an advantage as far as like how the show, for those of you guys that may be living under a rock and don't know how it's set up, there's a competition element to it where, there's a leaderboard and it's basically pounds of tuna or actually, dollars earned from tuna caught, dictates the standings. So does that give you kind of a competitive leg up for the purposes of the show, do you feel?
I think so. I mean, I think that speed, and we say it all the time, speed kills. And, we can fish later. We can get out there earlier. But, with the center console, it's a different style of fishing. So, you have these guys on a down east boat that, say in this competition, they're leaving at 6 p.m. the night before. You get out to your spot, you anchor up, you catch bait all night, you get sleep on the ball. You wake up at 3 in the morning and you put a rod out. And with a center console, you can't really do that. I mean, trust me, I tried that. The first year I did Wicked Tuna, I was like, yeah, we're going to go out there and, spend the night. And you just, I mean, when you wake up at 4 in the morning covered in dew, everything's soaking wet. You can't even charge your phone on the boat because everything's, it literally just says like water detected. So we've had times out there where, we got no contact with land.
the covered in dew, man. That's such a, one time we were out on an overnight fluke trip on the Helen H. I was like, I'm going to sleep up top because you have everybody snoring and farting in the cabin down below. So I wake up and I'm like hypothermic, just covered in the dew. But yeah, so it's
that's a real thing. So yeah, we just have a different game plan. Center console, we leave early. So instead of leaving at 5, 6 p.m. the night before like a down east boat, we're leaving at 2, 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
On some of those Chatham trips, it's amazing. We leave at 1 a.m. and I mean, more often than not, we'd be back in Gloucester by 1 p.m.
Really?
So we'd run down there. It'd take 3.5 hours. I mean, that bites between 7 and 9 a.m. So pluck one off real quick, then run 3 hours back. And we're back in Gloucester by noon.
Yeah.
So part of the rules about Wicked Tuna is you have to depart from Gloucester. Like you couldn't trailer down to, Bass River.
I mean, you could, but you got to come back and unload to Gloucester.
Okay.
So that's where it's just how they
adding mileage to it, dropping a guy out the truck off. And
yeah, just a lot. Yeah, a lot of extra stuff. But yeah, I mean, everyone, you got to come back to unload in Gloucester. So if you want to go to Chatham, that means that you got to make it back to Gloucester. And now you're mixing in RFDs. So there's RFDs. If it's it's closed, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday. If it's Monday night, you're in Chatham, you hook up at 4 p.m. and you're on a down east boat, are you going to get back to Gloucester? Probably not. I hook up in Gloucester, or if I hook up in Chatham on a center console, I can make it back by midnight. So. And
it was it 2 years ago that's where a lot of the boats were running down the Chatham. And,
yeah.
I mean, we were out there recreationally fishing, and it was pretty incredible the amount of life out there, man.
Incredible.
The amount of giants that you were hooking when we weren't trying to, it was nuts down there.
Yeah, I mean it's maybe a pitfall of the fishery of how not easy they are to catch down there, but just how many there are. So just that mass of fish down there was just so big compared to up Jeffrey's Ledge and Stellwagen Bank. I mean, at the time maybe you'd mark a couple fish a day, and there's just smaller biomass of fish up there. Down in Chatham, I mean you'd mark them by the hundreds.
Yeah,
and
it was pretty ridiculous. Like I remember that one day we were out there where we broke all the rods, like the whole fish find. That
was a
whole
weird
other
day.
thing.
It happens.
But the whole fish finder's red. Like we thought they were tuna on top. They were dolphins. But then we're like, oh man, they're just dolphins. Let's look. You look at the fish finder, and it is straight red to the bottom, and just the jig gets 50 feet down and got eaten. But
Yeah,
it was
it's
insane.
amazing.
Now, is there? I've heard this, and I'm not sure why it would be true. I guess maybe the bait, but difference in quality of the fish in terms to the buyer, like Chatham versus say Cape Cod Bay or up by you on Jeffries versus say Newport, Rhode Island. Like, is it? Do you see any difference in that, or is?
Huge difference.
Yeah?
Yeah. So like the buyers, sometimes you'd bring a fish back and like the buyers would be like, is that a Chatham fish? So
No kidding.
And it's all, you are what you eat. So those fish are down there just gorging on sand eels, and the fish that eat sand eels are just notoriously known not to have a lot of fat content. So, you get a fish on Jeffries or Stellwagen Bank that's been eating, herring and mackerel for, 2 weeks, and you compare that to a fish that's been eating just sand eels, I mean, they're going to look like two completely different fish.
Is a herring fish the holy grail, or is it is that better than bunker?
Yeah, herring fish is a holy grail. Yeah, Northern Jeffries fish that's been eating herring. I mean, they come up looking like, like pumpkins. And you can ask the buyers too. I mean, that's for whatever reason. I mean, that's what they want. The fish that's been eaten on herring. I mean, the bunker fish, yeah, but those are usually big, giant fish. So, it's hard. It can be hard to move a 600-pound core. Not every restaurant wants to take a 600-pounder.
So you see that in the show with the buyers. They'll say, "Oh, this is a smaller fish. This will move. This will be easy to move."
Right.
Whereas the bigger fish, I mean, the smaller one's probably easy to move domestically, right?
Yeah, easier. Everything about it. So I mean, if you're, it's going to cost more to get a 600-pounder to Japan than it would, a 200-pounder, just with weight purposes. And then, a lot of them, restaurants buy them whole. So to take a restaurant that buys an 85-incher, they can turn that over pretty quick. 200 pounds, 250 pounds of meat, maybe a few days of so the fish is still fresh. But you throw a 600-pounder in there, and they're not. They can't
They don't
turn
have that turn.
They can't turn that fish over while it's fresh. So that's why you see most of those big fish will just get cut, and kind of broken down.
Yeah.
But.
Is there a lot of decision making that goes in for a commercial season on where you're going to fish based on the price, or is it you go where the fish are and hope for the best?
It depends. It's a numbers game. So it's like if you're looking at your expenses and what you're making off each individual fish, it's going to look like you're in the red. But, if you just play it as a number game and you catch as many as you can, the best fish I ever caught was in the middle of July. It was July 4th weekend. And, that's usually notoriously not great prices or not great quality fish. And we had this fish, and it was still the fattest, nicest fish I ever caught. Sent it over to Japan, did the best in the world that day. It was the number one fish on auction, $56 a pound. I think it returned 32 or something.
It's incredible.
It was just in July. We had no idea. We got this fish, and I'm like, just another fish. We had no ice on it, and came back, and it just ended. It's just how it is. But that was a fish that was just sticking around eating herring for a long time. He probably never even left. He was probably there since the season before.
Do you see that happen with tuna where they stick around all year round? You see them out dragging, and we're like, oh.
Yeah, not like it wouldn't be like the summertime. It's not like you're out there. There's one. Oh, there's breaking over there. We're marking them, but we see them. They're there. There are definitely some fish that just are like, hey, October, November, December rolls around and the bait stays, and all their buddies are leaving, and they're like, wait, why am I leaving? This is great.
There goes my competition. I'm going to stick around.
Exactly. I don't want to go swim 1,000 miles because my DNA tells me to. Like they're like, hey, let's stay here. So actually this year, it's becoming more and more prevalent to catch in January up here now.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Man.
I mean, back years ago, there was never even a person with their boat, a tuna guy with his boat ready to fish in January.
Do you think that's a fisherman, calling it quits type of deal, and maybe they were out there, or do you just think they more of a migrated and the water was probably getting colder and things kind of mild down for us, so slowly but surely they were like, well, I'm going to stick this out?
Yeah, it's a combination. I mean, you go back 10 years ago and, we'd be ice fishing in December.
Yeah.
And now, you're not ice fishing until mid-January. So, more and more guys are like, hey, let me keep the boat in a little longer. I mean, we're fishing in December, mid-December. The water's still almost 50 degrees and there's tons of bait around. So, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to be like, hey, there might be some tuna around here.
Yeah.
I mean, this last year, there were so many fish around in November, but it wasn't open, and guys were just waiting for December to open. And then they filled that quota pretty quickly, I think, man.
Very quickly. I mean, sad to see how many, I mean, not sad, it's a good thing. It's helping all the local economies, all the tackle shops. I mean, everybody's, contributing to that economy. It's great. But I mean, when it's December 1st and you see 80 boats out there on Stowwagon Bank, you're like, wow, this is crazy.
It's wild, man, that there's so many people that have gotten into it. And a fair amount of those people aren't like, you make your living fishing year round.
They're just picking up a commercial license to help with their recreational, fuel bill.
With their interest. But at the end of the day, it's an open access fishery. That's how it is. And, hey, I was once one of those guys that was, didn't really know how to fish and was going out there and wasn't doing it for, a living. But so, I've been on both sides of the spectrum, and I can respect those guys that, they work in an office all week and they're looking forward to that Saturday where they get to go out with their buddies and go catch a tuna. And, I'm not going to be the guy that'd be like, hey, no, you can't do that. Only I can,
Sure.
So, it gets frustrating when you see a lot of guys out there. But at the end of the day, you just gotta know that it's access for everybody, and it just means the more boats there are out there, the better you have to be individually to get that bite inside the fleet. So, there's always a silver lining. If there's that many boats out there, it's just going to push me to be better and to fish harder, and I might learn some stuff along the way. So always got to pick that lining.
So being out there fishing commercially, obviously you got the size limits to work around, and it's something that we deal with and try to help out with as much as possible. How do you handle a fish that's like, right on the cusp? Like, walk me through that, being not sure if this fish is a keeper or not. Like, how do you deal with that fish boat side safely?
Yeah, how do you know whether to throw the harpoon or not? I mean, without measuring it.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to have an eye for it. I'd like to say that I got a pretty good eye for it. I mean, if it's in that, 70 to 75 inch, you're like, all right, it's on that. But for some reason, when it's that 74 incher, I just kind of know. But there are the times where, say you're in Chatham and you catch 10 rats and they're all 72, and you just, if you get a 73, you're going to take them and go home. But, with the time flies, I got a door. Mm-hmm. So, if he's right on that cusp, we'll just pull him in, we'll just pull him in right with the gaff, put a little towel over his eye so he doesn't go crazy, and measure him real quick. And if he's a keeper, boom, he gets a kick in the head. And, and if not, we just push him right out the door and on to the next. So
Gaff placement when you're dragging them through the door, is it just right in the lower lip and that little crease up front?
Yeah, it's just right. You don't want to just stay away from the gills.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just like a bigger hook imprint. But yeah, right in the tip of that jaw. It's a nice small little gaff, and at the end of the day, hopefully it's gonna tell that fish not to bite a hook for a little while.
Do you find yourself on your charter trips when you do take clients tuna fishing on, let's say it's an off commercial day, do you handle a lot of tuna that are giants that you don't end up harvesting because you can't, and how do you handle that fish when it's time to release them?
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, I mean, we do plenty of trips on these off days, and it's actually some of my favorite type of fishing is because it's closed. There's no pressure on it. When that rod goes off, it's not stress. It's like, all right, like
this is fun.
Yeah, if we lose them, we lose them. We're not keeping them anyway. And if we catch them, then we get to revive them and see them. But so we'll fish heavier drag for sure. I always like to be light on the hook set, but on a closed day, you can usually tell.
Put the heat on them.
Yeah, put that heat on them. We don't want to fight them more than an hour. And then, usually what I do, it's different for everybody, but I'll just, once we catch them, we'll just put the drag up to full, and then I'll just slowly go in reverse. And that fish stays right out front, and it kind of swims them back. And as soon as, he kind of gets his balls back a little bit, we'll cut him off, or he'll break off.
Now, you say you're putting it in reverse. Now, if you haven't seen it on the show, you fight the fish off the bow.
Yeah.
So
right. So yeah, we fight the fish. We're usually landing the fish on the bow, and so we'll be up there. We'll catch them, and sometimes I just would kind of refrain, like you were talking about, with putting that lip through the gaff. I mean, or gaff through the lip. I mean, if I don't have to, I won't.
Yeah.
If it's a little one and you got to pull them in the boat, how else are you going to do it?
Yeah, exactly.
But sometimes, you see guys that are, releasing them, and like the first thing they do is get a gaff in there, and they're swimming them, and I mean, it can't be great for the fish, and it's pretty easily when you're pulling it out, it's nick a little part of the gill.
Sure.
So
Tuna bleed.
Right.
Easily.
Yeah, I mean, there's some guys out there, really good charter guys, that have it down. When they catch them, they get them right at the boat, and they swim. You usually want to swim for at least a half hour. So and it's cool with the clients. They get to look there, and you get a bunch of pictures, and you see that thing come back to life. You see a defeated fish, and he gets his color back, and he starts splashing. You're like, all right, it's time to send them back.
Yeah.
Now, have you used, I forget the name of it, it's an Italian company. It looks like a supersized Boga grip. Now, do people still use those? I feel like they were real popular a couple years ago. I haven't seen as much about them in the last couple seasons.
I mean, great tool. I know, Dave Marciano. I know I saw him using it. A bunch of the Cape guys were doing it, and it's a great tool. It definitely is. Just on a center console, you get the engines, and I don't want to bring the fish on the side of the boat. I my first couple of years of fishing, I always brought them on the side of the boat, and just a lot of dings and a lot of scratches. And if you can keep them up front and away from the boat as much as possible, I mean, that's just how I do it on my boat.
That's a good point. So you're keeping them away from the props, away from better for the boat, better for the fish.
Yeah, I mean, if you think if that fish comes by, even if he scratches that bottom paint one time, I mean, you're taking that fish's immune system, and you're just destroying it. That's their immune system, is the slime on his skin. So, I like to, as much as I like to, kill those things and bring them back. I mean, I like to see them swim away just as much. I'm a young guy. I want to be fishing, into my 50s and 60s for them, and the only way you can do that is to keep things
respect
going.
the resource and make sure it keeps. I mean, it's right now. It's got to be some of the healthiest tuna, populations that we've seen in our lifetimes, probably.
Oh, for sure, man. I mean, every year it's exciting.
Yeah.
Every year there's more and more coming, and it's just known as being like one of the biggest successes for a fisheries rebuilt.
Yeah, they preface it. I think it's after the first commercial break on Wicked Tuna. They say, like, the bluefin tuna fishery has declined since the 1950s. And I think that was more true probably when the show had started, because they, these guys are making their living one fish at a time. I forget the exact quote, but it does talk about the decline, which I think it started in 2008 or 2009, Wicked Tuna, maybe a little bit later than that. But the fishery then was not at its lowest low, but it was at a lower point then. That's when guys were running out to Georgia's
That
Bank.
narrative was more appropriate back then. I feel like it's changed quite a bit.
I mean, yeah, now it's, they're restricting fishing days. I mean, there's never, maybe back in the 90s or whatever, but I mean, now they're restricting it because, it's just that supply and demand. If there's 50 fish come in, it's just that price is just tanking.
Yeah, you got to restrict it, because if you let people fish the entire time, you'd blow the quota out of the water before the fish even got fat and were of good quality.
And then nobody's making money.
Yeah.
You've got the fish aren't being... You're not using the resource, yeah.
They're spreading out the take days over the course of the season to, kind of feather it along, because there's so many fish. Right. Whereas if you were back in those more trying times, the quota's the quota, and it just rolls all season long. And a lot of times people wouldn't even be able to catch the quota with all those days to fish. So that's the purpose of restricting it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great tool. Like you said, we're just, as fishermen, we're shooting ourselves in the foot if we're catching all the quota in June and July when they're not worth anything. And then it leads to a bad product too. These restaurants are expecting a tuna with a lot of fat in it and a nice eating fish, and they're just getting something that's just red meat, and it's not as palatable. So, it's better for us, when they have fat, and it's better for, the consumer.
The people at Z-Man Fishing have been dedicated to ignoring the book on traditional lure making, instead setting out to create truly category-defining lures, soft baits, and jig systems that simply catch fish. At Z-Man, authentic innovation remains a badge of honor, recognized and admired by countless fans worldwide. I'm one of those fans. I've fished countless Z-Man products in both fresh and salt, from their chatterbaits to their soft plastics made from a material they call Elastec. Some of the most naturally acting, durable soft baits I've ever fished. I've caught PBs on their smallest baits, like on a massive brown trout, choked a micro finesse TRD while targeting smallies, to hooking giant tarpon and redfish on their diesel minnows, which are also phenomenal striper baits. The best part is, when bluefish show up, they'll hold up to them too. Give them a look at zmanfishing.com or ask for them at your local shop. So, the popularity that Wicked Tuna gave to this specific tuna fishery, right? You've got a lot of people, we've talked about the weekend warriors that now are permitting their boats and commercial fishing as weekend warriors and stuff. How has that changed the dynamic of how a fleet works together? Like back growing up, tuna fishing on Stellwagen with my old man, it was like there were so many unwritten rules. And then there was always this one guy where my dad would lose his shit over it. And it's like, I feel like if he was alive today, that's going to be something that you guys have to deal with on an unprecedented level because of the popularity of giant tuna fishing. How's that been?
Yeah, I mean, it can be tough. It can be tough when you're out there and, it's a beautiful Sunday and there's 100 boats on top of you. And I mean, to each his own. Everybody has the same right to be out there. It's a public, it's a public resource. And, I was once, in that realm. But, I mean, the biggest thing is the fleet etiquette. I mean, it's when you got everybody is anchored on, is usually a quarter mile, is kind of what you want to give guys. And sometimes, it comes into, maybe 0.125 if it's really, really tight, or if you know the guy. That's another big thing. Is like, hey, if you're going to anchor up on somebody, maybe swing by and say, hey, like, do you mind if I, jump right next to you? Or, if my baits go towards your ball, I'll move, or something like that. And now it's just a free for all, man. It's just out there, just going like this and throwing your anchor and hoping that it doesn't land on somebody's lines.
What's some advice that you could give people, like, outline that fleet etiquette and the do's and don'ts of being out there and kind of, working towards working together?
What's the most egregious breach of etiquette?
I was going to ask that too. I want some of those stories. There's got to be some good ones.
Oh, yeah. I mean, right off the bat, it's probably just anchoring. The etiquette is not wanting to anchor on top of somebody. If you can read someone's t-shirt and you can hear their conversation and, you're probably a little bit too close. But I mean, the all-time worst is when you're fighting a fish. I mean, if you're fighting a fish and it's become like, that's why we transitioned to fighting from the bow of a center console, because you would hook up in a fleet and you got a guy here, you got a guy there, you're boxed in and you have to drive that fish out. So if that fish wants to go towards the other boat, you gotta drive, you gotta walk them out of the fleet. So
Sure.
That's become one of the biggest things on those packed days is walking your fish out of the fleet, because I mean, if you get them tangled in an anchor line or in someone else's lines, I mean, it's a lot of times you're kissing that thing goodbye. So
Yeah. So to walk them out, are you less drag pressure on it, or not trying to make them freak out too much? Just
it depends. I mean, hey, if that thing's going through right to somebody's boat or right to their anchor line and they're just sitting in the beanbag snoozing, I'll put the drag up, I'll stop him. Or if he is going the right way up on the high ground where nobody is, I'll just put the drag down and let him go. Just take everything. So that way, he's way out there, and then we can just put the boat in gear, chase and put the drag back up and go that way.
that's got to be another advantage of the center console.
It is. I mean, this past year, I've never seen anything like it, and you'll see some of this on the show. We would hook up, and these fish would never go straight up and down. And that's how you catch them, is you fight them, for how long it takes you. And then you get the fish straight up and down. You get him circling, he comes up slow, you put a dart in him, you put the tail rope on him. There, that's tuna fishing. This past year, you'd hook these fish, and they didn't want to be anywhere near the bottom. It would be 3 hours into the fight, and you'd see them a quarter mile up in the high ground splashing like crazy. So in that case, we would just chase them. It's
Some of those big fish love the surface.
they do not want to go down. It's just these runs of fish. I mean, you get fish that come in from the Mediterranean, you get ones that come down from Canada, you get ones that come up from North Carolina. So, you get this, it's just like picking a fight with somebody. I mean, sometimes you pick a fight with some guy that's been sitting on the couch for 2 weeks or some guy that's been in the gym every day. I mean, it's going to be a little different
That's
either
a
way.
really good way to put it, because, every fish has a different fight to them. And what's one of the craziest, tuna that you've hooked that just threw everything at you and was like, whoa, this fish was came correct today?
I think that would be this year. In kind of what I was saying, we call them middle bank monsters because there's just, you hooked up, and if it was in this certain part of Stellwagen Bank, it was like, all right, we're going to be fighting this thing for 3 hours. It doesn't matter what type of drag you want to do or what type of finesse you got. I mean, this fish is not going to give up for 3 hours or more. And we had this one fish. He took us, I think, 13 or 14 miles. We fought him for 6.5 hours till I think 11 p.m. at night is when we ended up breaking him off. And we could see him. I had him right there, and I looking back, I should have thrown the dart. But it's crazy. You drive right up on him. So we'd be right up in front of him, and I get the dart in my hand, and I'm like, should I hit him? Like, I know if I hit this thing, it is going to be it's going to be an explosion. Mm-hmm. And, I was like, no, I'll wait till he tires out. And we lost him, 6.5 hours, 1,000-pounder, no doubt. The biggest fish I've ever seen. And then, so after that, I was like, my mate, Andrew Slickland, he fished with me this year on the show. We just switched our game plan. We said, that's not happening again. I said, next time there's a fish on the surface, just drive me right up to it.
Yep, give me a shot.
Give me a shot. So we'd see him up there, and, Slick would be right on the wheel, and he would, just like a freaking, F1 driver, he'd get me right up on that fish. I'd have the harpoon right there, and I would just reel it, and then just jump off and nail them. And
that's cool.
And I mean, I'll tell you, there's pros and cons to that game plan, because when you hit a fish and they have no idea you're behind them.
Yeah.
Because if you're creeping up on them, you just go, you're picking up the slack that the boat is gaining on. Yeah. So the fish doesn't really even know you're there. As soon as you try to yank on him, that fish will go down. But if you go nice and easy, you can drive right up on him. He's got no idea. And then when you hit him with that dart, yeah, it's coming, that line. And I had a scare this year, man. Same thing of what I'm talking about. All fishermen, you got to be really careful of that dart line. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, that was probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me tuna fishing is, fish is right there. I'm like, I want him so bad, but I know he's not green. And I hit him and caught a coil. The coil, wrapped me up right by the ankle. It was only a 95-inch fish. The thing tossed me like a rag doll right across the boat, was bringing me right over, and luckily I was able to grab the recessed gunnel. Yeah. And I had one hand on the gunnel, I had my other hand on the line, and he still had me wrapped up, and I held on, as hard as I could, and it broke a 1,000-pound main line. 1,000-pound, it snapped. The dart stayed in the fish. Nothing pulled. The line, 1,000-pound dart line, just snapped. I had 3rd-degree burns all over my hands.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, yeah.
Man.
So you got to be careful. There was another guy, right? It was the same week where these fish, guys were just taking their shots too early. One of the guys out there got his hands wrapped up in the dart, and there go 2 of his fingers. Yeah. So dangerous.
How do you rig your dart?
I rig my dart just with a bowline. I go through the dart, and then I'll just come back with a large bowline, and I have a long line clip on the bottom of the dart, and that just keeps the tension on there, and nice and simple. I like my darts where you can throw them. Mm-hmm. Some guys got these darts where there's lines hanging in, they're big bulky things, and if you ever get a shot,
paint sticks on them and all kinds of stuff.
Exactly. Mine's like these slim little steel poles that if you ever get the shot, you can throw it. I actually had, I think it was 2 years ago, where we got a fish. He's straight up and down. He's probably 20 feet under the boat, and the hook pulls. And the thing, there's that split second where he's like, oh, and he's just sitting there. And I had the harpoon in my hand, and I just took the Cinderella shot, and I got him free swimming away. Oh. And, How
was that fight on the dart line, man?
Yeah, that was tough. that fish, he brought me right to the gunnel end. But we got him. But that's why, you kind of, if you ever get a chance to throw it, and it's a Hail Mary shot, you want something that's going to kind of go through nice,
So so is it just you and your mate?
Yeah. So I mean, you see some of these other crews where there's 3-4
Looks like
guys.
a family reunion out there.
Yeah, it's like what every guy's getting $100. You get $100, you get $100. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So if we're out there going to make money, it's two guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's the boat makes a check, I make a check, and the mate makes a check. Usually it's a third, and third. And if you want a good mate, you're gonna have to pay them. You're gonna have to make money. So if you got two mates and they're both making 50%, getting nothing, I mean, both of them are gonna walk.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, I mean, we're out there to make money, and I think on a center console, it's just two guys. It's from a money standpoint.
Have you ever had a fish die on you while you were fighting it?
I've heard stories like that, but no, I've never been that lucky.
I don't know if it's lucky. Sometimes they're hard
I've heard
to.
they're tough to lift when
Yeah,
they,
sometimes they're hard to like. It would happen, I guess. My dad said you'd have to like kind of plane them up from the bottom, and it could be a lot more taxing on your gear than fighting a live fish.
I've heard that more with big blue marlin than tuna. Like they'll sound, and then once they hit a certain depth, they end up dying, and then the guys can't lift them.
I mean, when you tail wrap a fish, you bring them in all the time, and they're just stone cold dead. But you're bringing them up like the back way. It's if you had a fish that was hooked in the mouth, and you're trying to bring them up that, I think it would be a little bit more weight. But when he's hooked in the tail, they usually come up pretty easily. That's like a godsend when you get a tail wrap.
So you're in the middle of a fleet. It's competitive fishing. What is your go-to, like, this is gonna, separate me, or this is my confidence bait? Like, what's your go-to? I need a bite. This is what I'm rolling with. I know it's always what you have,
right?
But if you could say, this is what I want to put down there and put it down there, what would that be?
Oh, it depends. I mean, if you're in Chatham, then big mackerel on the bottom. If you're on Stellwagen, then maybe a pogie on the kite, or a bait in the midwater. If you're on Jeffries, then you want a down herring. So I guess it depends on the spot. Anywhere northern Jeffries is very herring related. You gotta put in the time and effort to get it. But I'm on a center console, and keeping herring alive is not easy.
No.
So, you get these guys that have chilled live wells. The herring are more comfortable in the guy's live well than they are in the ocean. So, that's a different kind of playing field. And I think herring fishing is it's tedious. They're so delicate. You got to check them all day. When you're reeling them, you got to just so gingerly bring them in, or else it's going to pull the thing through. So I like mackerel. I want to put a big mackerel out there, and I just want to, those things are just tough brutes. And, one of my favorite fish in the ocean.
Mackerel's a hardy bait.
Do you ever fish bluefish up by you?
A little bit.
Yeah.
There are times where we'll see them roll through on the bank. Last year, we had them, I'm not even kidding, we had balls of bluefish, like big 30-inch fish, and there's tuna blowing them out of the water.
That's incredible.
We have a full spread of mackerel, herring, you name it, out there, and the fish are jumping over our lines. We didn't even get a sniff because he didn't have a bluefish. But there's plenty of them around. It seems like more and more every year.
You fish the kite a lot?
Usually, yeah. I mean, that's kind of what you're talking about. If there's a huge fleet going on and everybody, is got the same baits out, and you can just put a kite out there, it a lot of times can be the difference of, catching nothing and going home with a nice one. So
now I know sometimes boats will fish the dead baits. Are the herring effective dead, or is that mostly mackerel they're doing as the stick baits, or is it herring too?
You can use anything for a dead bait. I mean, you could take a dead goldfish and put a hook in it and make that thing look good enough to get a bite on. But yeah, it's whatever you got.
So is it like a last resort to use a dead bait, like everything's died off in the well, or or is that a way to show them something different?
It's a way to show them something different. So, like, in my opinion, I think it's always wise to have a dead bait in the spread. You get that fish that, everyone sees it. They come up and they're chasing your fish, and then they can't get it and they go. But, that's the, appealing thing about a stick bait is they don't run. they don't run. And
they dance ever so seductively.
Yeah, just kind of going in the current like that, and the tuna's like, oh, that's an easy meal.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes where the dogfish are so bad, or the sharks are so bad, and squid too. You put a stick bait down there in northern Jeffries sometimes, I mean, the squid will pick that thing down to the bone. So there's times where you can fish a stick, and there's times where you can't.
It's got to be frustrating because there's no indication that the squid are after your bait. I mean, with dogfish at least, maybe the balloon's bouncing. Or
even the dogfish can be tough sometimes. It takes a trained eye to know that you got a dogfish on one of the balloon baits,
It does.
Squid's kind of one of my confidence bait. A live squid, I feel like a tuna can't say no.
It's deadly. I love having a big squid out there. I mean, if you can have like a squid, a mackerel, and a herring, or like I like anything that's like has a little bit of options in there. You know, if I'm ever fishing, maybe it's bad bait fishing. You got 3 mackerel out. You're like, I wish I could just have one other type of bait in there. But yeah, you mix a squid in there, you're gonna get bit.
Do you typically fish 3 rods?
3 rods. Yeah, on the center console, I'll put out 1 high, 1 medium, 1 low. And then when we get desperate, we'll throw a kite in there. Or we'll fish a kite, a medium, and a low. But yeah, putting 4 rods out, that's the issue. So you got 2 guys and you hook up and one guy's on the rod and then the other guy's got to reel in 3 other ones while moving the boat, getting the boat off the anchor. You got a fleet and you got stuff mixing up. So I think 3 rods with 2 guys is like the best kind of, game plan in my opinion. But
Everglades Boats is an industry leader in premium offshore fishing boats, respected for its renowned and unsinkable ram cap hull design. Everglades builds center console and hybrid boats from 24 to 45 feet that make a statement about the status and savvy of their owner. Every Everglades model originates from a single purpose: to fish better than anything on the water. When the weather kicks up, no problem, as you'll quickly learn why Everglades has such an amazing reputation for being an awesome rough riding boat. Find your local dealer at evergladesboats.com. Everglades Boats, built for beyond.
Now, how is the boat set up? So you mentioned there's a pilot house. Did you add that after you'd had it for a while? Was that something, or did you, when you got the boat, did you put the pilot house on there?
So yeah, that was actually factory pilot house.
Okay.
Everglades just had the model, and we, there was only like a half a dozen of them made, or 10 of them or so made, and it just wasn't a popular model. So they took it off, and they couldn't sell them. So we ended up grabbing one because it was just at the time my dad and I we wanted something where we could go out and fish April 15th ground fish in the spring, and fish all summer. And then, when it gets cold in the winter or, in the fall, still make it, go out for Halloween and stuff like that. We go out for Thanksgiving and
oh, that's awesome.
The pilot house it just made it one, the boat, you had that comfort, but you also had that speed. So, you can fish these little windows, or if my dad and I wanted to go out and just go catch a cooler full of haddock and come back in and be back in by noon, I mean, it gave you that flexibility. But it's having that pilot house is huge, I'll tell you, because when it's rough out and you're staying nice and dry in there, it's funny. My camera guy, he sits on a bean bag, so it's me, my mate, and then we have a camera guy on the boat when we're filming. And the poor guy, he would just be looking inside, and we would just be like looking outside and seeing like a wet dog, and you just feel bad for him, But we got to the point where he'd sit behind the pilot house on a bean bag, and then we would come out, we'd sit down, full weather gear.
Yeah.
And then he'd sit down and we put a tarp over him, and we'd wrap the tarp in under the bean bag so that cause he's still getting wet. And then, even if you got your gear on, you're sitting in a puddle, and it sucks. But yeah, we'd get, I'd be like, all right, we're here. And we'd literally unwrap my camera guy and be like, all right, here we go.
That's too funny. That's going to be kind of an interesting dynamic. I mean, you're out there at the end of the day, you're still commercially fishing for a check. But you have this, basically stranger thrust into your operation. What was that dynamic like to kind of, find that happy medium to be able to work together and successfully film a show and successfully fish?
Yeah, it was a big learning curve. I mean, anybody can go out there, catch a tuna and, make it look good. But once the cameras are on board, it's just a little different. And you're going on there, you got to follow their agenda. It's, you got to leave, it's just, there's a lot that goes into it. But, I don't have enough good things to say about those camera guys. I mean, we call them shooter producers because they are shooting the show, but they're also producers. So they're also producing, it's non-scripted reality, but there's guideline, every year has its own little, its own kind of avenue on how they want to push it. COVID was bad prices, and then the next year was working together, and so these guys are very good at filming their everything that they have to do, filming us, but also kind of being there to kind of produce the show.
Yeah.
Finding the theme through the season.
Exactly. And they, we're not actors, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're not actors. And these guys know, and you say, if you say something maybe a little bad or whatever, he might be like, hey, say it this way or say it again. So like these guys are looking out for you. They want you to, look your best.
Yeah.
And how I make it and how a lot of the guys on the show make it is that camera guy, he becomes part of your crew. So he's eating when you guys are eating, he's sleeping, is a part of the crew, and become great friends.
Yeah. Now you've worked with the same cameraman throughout your entire time.
Mostly, we did get they will switch up. I mean, those guys, they're doing all sorts of other shows. So if they'll be in Alaska, then they'll go do Deadliest Catch, and if they can do Wicked Tuna, they'll make it. But they jump around through different shows, and like I said, I can't credit those guys enough to be able to like jump on my boat and just go commercial tuna fishing, like especially when you put in like the competition base, and I'm a younger guy, I'm still trying to prove myself in this Wicked Tuna realm, and like it would not be easy for a guy that's never been tuna fishing just to get on my boat and to run through that program. And this guy does it with a smile on his face, the vibes, you get that like bad vibe on the boat and it's contagious.
Yeah.
It's like
when you can tell somebody's uncomfortable or doesn't want to be there, all of a sudden it kind of like it permeates through the whole trip.
When it's blowing 30 and it's raining and and like I look up at him and he looks at me and he smiles and I'm like, and it makes me smile. I'm like, all right, it's my guy. And
awesome.
So they they become part of the crew, and they're just, those guys are rugged. Like I said, he'll even being under that tarp, he'll start his day being soaking wet and cold, and then he's got to run through GoPros that are just breaking, and salt, it just ruins everything. So
I mean, if these guys are filming Deadliest Catch too, I mean, that's
This got to be a walk in the park. Compared to that looks insane.
Yeah, it's like a rite of passage for them. Once they do Deadliest Catch, it's like, all right, I can do anything else. Like Alaska, living in the in the woods, I can do that. I did Deadliest Catch. Or Wicked Tuna, I could jump on this boat. I was on a boat for 2 months. So. But it's cool to see how those guys kind of work with you and really, they also know sometimes, say you break off a fish, right? And you're just in a bad mood. And like, if he got in your face with a camera, you might be like, say something you don't want to.
Yeah.
You're in a whatever. And like, these guys are so good at their job. They'll understand, be like, hey, let's let him cool off a minute. 10 minutes, he'll come back when you're kind of leveled out and be like, hey man, like
what happened there?
What happened? Yeah. And like those type of things is like kind of shows, like they're looking out for you, and
that's cool.
But they're awesome.
Now, do they have to the fishing itself? Like, say you get a bite, you haven't seen it. Like, will they point things out to you, or are they very hands off?
No, it's funny. These guys, they know a lot about tuna fishing because they've done it so long. Like there's plenty of times where he's like, oh, we're on, and I'd be like, what? And he sees it first, or he'll see some bait on the screen or something, and they get pretty good, and they recognize, you'll be fishing and he'll be like, .com's tight over there, and you're like, what? Like, how do you even, how can you differentiate the boats? And they're some of those guys, we laugh and say, we're saying like which cameraman or shooter producer would be able to, take the boat and catch a fish.
That would be a pretty cool little wrinkle.
That'd be a great episode.
Right? Where it's like, all right, we're going to take the three most tenured guys and we're going to set them up for a day and see if they can put a fish in the boat.
See who can do it. Because, I mean, in some of the 13 seasons, some of these guys have done it every single year. They know how to rig a stick bait. They know where to anchor up. They know some of these trade secrets that, like, nobody else knows, and they're just there for it. And they're like sponges. They are. These guys, if they hear something, they know it. They're very, very smart, and, a ton of respect.
Have you had a camera guy that has, like, been the difference in you catching a fish or landing a fish or losing a fish?
Yeah, I would never, as a captain, I would never put the blame. Even I used to tell my mate, if, no matter what you do, it's always my fault.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, when you're fighting that fish, I could walk up there and, cut the line and, it would still be my fault. So I always try to, I think it always should be on the captain. I've never been a guy that's, even if the camera guy like slipped and fell and broke the rod while we were on, I'd just be like, hey, I would never make him feel like that.
Should have had the deck more secured or whatever.
I mean, that's how it is. I mean, if you're the captain of the boat, I mean, the responsibility falls on you. I mean, even it's just an excuse excuse. You're just making
Sure.
an excuse. But definitely, I've had times where like the camera guys, I would ask him just like you, be like, hey, like, what do you think? Like, should we stay here? Should we move? And like, he'd be like, give me his honest opinion. Be like, no, they're gonna come through here. Like, I feel it. And I'm like, all right, Eric, like, let's go. And then sure enough, like they, and then we get a bite. So there's been a lot of like weird little things like that they've attributed to helping us out for sure.
So it sounds like a great relation. So like you said, it's almost like a 2-month vacation for you. Is that how long the filming is?
Yeah, it's exactly how I look at it. Just it is like a vacation. I mean, my first couple of years, I mean, I was stressed through the roof because there's a lot as a young guy on a center console going up against these, really, heavy hitters in the industry. But now I've kind of taken, some of the stress out of it and try to make it a little bit more fun. I think it makes a better product at the end of the day.
When you look like you're having fun, you are having fun. It makes it better. It's more fun to watch.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. But it definitely, there are the points where you're like, oh gosh, I wonder how that's gonna look on TV. But that just is what it is.
Who determines the fishing days? Like, is it you all along, or during the filming season, and you're going out? Or is it your shooter producer saying, "Okay, everybody's fishing today, fish today," or are you looking at the conditions and you're making that call?
So basically, we would start filming on. So say we start filming on July 5th. It would be like, all right, this is start date, and it's like, in their realm, that's like the start of the season. So from like a reality TV show aspect, you couldn't film the whole tuna season because it's June until December with closures. So what they do is, you basically would film the season and film a month of the season, and it kind of extrapolates into the whole season. But they say we're filming July 4th, and every boat, that's the start of the season. So you would start there, and every boat has the same amount of days to fish until they declare it over. So it's like, maybe you get 3-4 weeks in and they get enough. It's all related to fish count.
We got the season.
We got what we need.
Yep.
So it'd be like, all right, guys, we got 2 more days to fish, and that's it. And that's how it goes.
Now, are you guys fishing in between filming days as well?
I mean, you can, if you wanted to, but I mean, there's just a lot on the line. You know what I mean?
Risk something happening to the boat.
Something happened to the boat. I mean, it's you cut yourself and you put yourself out from filming. So it's kind of the captain's, the captain's, judgment, and have some long days out there, and like, you just got to get some rest, some of those days.
So they obviously make it worthwhile to commit to that and be like, this is all I'm doing in this until this season's wrapped up, and then I'll move on to my life outside of Wicked Tuna.
Right. Yeah. All the captains, when you're filming, that's it. You're not doing anything else. I mean, there's guys on the show that are, JetBlue airline pilots, and that gets put on the side. So it's when you're filming, there's not much else. It's kind of like, horse with blinders on until it's over.
What's impressive about the show is that it's something that's entertaining for people who spend a lot of time fishing to watch, and then you got to figure people in Ohio who've never touched the ocean, like, that's entertaining for them. That's a tough balance to strike, to find something that serious fishermen can enjoy and then people who've never fished can enjoy. And that's what I've always found impressive about the show.
So you are a for-hire charter captain on the sport fishing side of things. You must, from that publicity, from being on the show, it must have, put you in the sights of, people from all over the world that say, hey, I want to fish on Time Flies.
Yeah, so originally when I got, my sight set on the show is like, you're like, oh, in turn, I'm going to have this great charter business where, people are going to see me on TV and it's great exposure. But then you get into that where, it's a short charter season, and for 2 months out of that short charter season, you're filming. Yep. So I'd work so hard to get these trips, and then they'd call me during filming and say, hey, I can't do it. So, it's a double-edged sword there for sure.
Yeah.
I kind of see it as like, when the show's done and over, whenever that may be,
yep.
I'll have a reputation where I could get charters off that. But for now, like when we're filming, I'll get some charters in, May, June, and into, beginning of July. But then, that big, most of July into August and sometimes into September is when we're filming. Yeah. So that's where I got into as, a guy that does want to work and fish every day. I'm like, hey, like I can't, with these charters, I'm not getting charters into the fall like some of these other guys are getting. So I had to kind of pivot in a way to really to stay afloat and make money.
Yeah, especially up there. I mean, you're missing a big chunk of the striped bass season, almost the entire striped bass season. So
yeah, and so we have those off days that we're not fishing. So I could, I'll go out and bass fish at night, or I'll go commercial bass fishing on an off day, and that's something where it's like I'm not working the boat too hard, I'm not working myself too hard, and can still turn a check. So you can on those off days you'd have your ability to do what you'd like.
So if you have no filming, you have no book charters, and you have no like commercial trips, what are you doing for fun on the water? What's that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, if there's no commercial fishing, it's, taking my girlfriend to the beach and, go out and, just have fun, just try to relax a little bit. I'm a big, just outdoorsman in general. So if it's, if we're not fishing, maybe we'll go for a hike in the woods or just be outside for, get some fresh air, stuff like that. But I mean, if you're a self-employed commercial fisherman, there's never a day where you don't have anything to do.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I mean, there is a long list. It doesn't, whether it's just, something small or big or adding fiberglass work, engine work. I mean, there's always something. And that's what I love about it. It just always keeps you busy. I mean, fishing is, technically a job and a passion, but it's also like a lifestyle. Like, as you guys know, like,
sure.
You were bass fishing yesterday, but, like you're thinking about it, you're looking online, you're looking at new spots in your off time, you're buying new gear, you're going to tackle shows, and it consumes you,
So take us through how you have how long have you had the Everglades for? A long time.
Yeah, 2014.
All right.
Yep.
So take us through kind of where you've got it to this point. Like, how do you have your boat set up? What things have you done to customize it to suit your tuna fishing needs? Like, what electronics do you run? Like, take me from the engines to the bow, like, everything from, swivel rod holders that you've added and some of the cool, bells and whistles that you've put on that boat to make it do what it does for you.
Yeah, have you done it to be competitive in wicked tuna against all these other big down east?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to the point where it seems like every year it's something new. So when we first got the boat in 2014, pretty much all I did was add swivel rod holders to it and put the necessary safety gear on. Put your EPIRB on, get your life raft and stuff like that, and then I went fishing. And then year after year, you'd be like, I need this. I need something else here. Let me move this swivel rod holder over this way. Or in the front, I changed from 0 degree to 15 degrees, so that it got it puts that rod tip out a little bit more. Nowadays, we're using all Winthrop X10 butts, so you can take a 0 degree rod holder,
make it whatever you want.
Yeah, no, you like it at a little bit lower angle.
I like it at a lower angle, yeah, just because it puts, on a center console, you got that bow, and when you're in your circles and you got that fish broken, I mean, it keeps the fish out, and it really, you're letting that rod kind of break that fish more than the drag is, because when that rod bends all the way over, it's pulling him back up, so you will have a lot of, we use Real Easy rods, in my opinion, best rods out there. I mean, there's plenty of times where you're not even putting any effort. All you're doing is you're just bending that rod and you can feel it lift, and you just bend them, feel it lift. And, you gotta really, owe a lot of these fish to the gear you're using. So, these Winthrop rod holder or Winthrop, butts, the X10s, absolute game changer. The Real Easy long rods, game changer. I started using Star rods when I first came in. All the glue would be coming undone. It was a nightmare. But over the years we've added all sorts of stuff. We just, this past year, we hooked up with Ray Marine, just got a whole new, top of the line electronics package. And we were lagging. I mean, everything I had was from 2014. I mean, you could barely hear me on the radio. We had older Garmin stuff, and, I've gone through a couple radars and whatnot. And now we got brand new, Axum touch screens from Ray Marine. We got a 4-foot open array, radar, which is, in my opinion, I've never had a radar open array, work like the Ray Marine does. I'm going 30 knots and I'm picking up a lobster buoy. and on top of that, we have the FLIR camera system now too. So we got night vision. I run the M300C, which is you wouldn't believe how clear it is. I mean, it's if I take a picture on my phone, it's not as clear as the picture that's putting onto my screens.
Yeah.
And we just got all new Lumitech lights.
Okay.
So before, it's like we'd hook up at, say you hook up at 6 p.m. and you fight that fish in the dark in the front of the center console. We lost a lot of fish because we couldn't see them. Like, trying to dart them. I'm like, I don't know where I'm throwing. But now, we just completely loaded the boat, all new Lumitech. We got razors up front. We got 5 underwater lights below. We got the whole POCO module. You can change all the colors in the lights. And that just even in the bait. So, we had no lights on the boat, like not, just deck lights. And now, we got the razors on either side. You get out there in the morning, you turn them on, you got bait just coming up to you. So like even that, what a huge difference that is to catch bait in the dark and to start putting bait out at first light instead of, jigging bait at first light.
It's nothing worse than having trouble making bait.
Oh, and
keeping bait management is crucial.
And that the live well, we got one 40-gallon live well on the boat, and that everything goes in there. And Everglades did a great job designing it. I mean, it's a circular pattern, so the fish are always moving around. It's got a blue color. It's got a nice clear top. It's got an aerator in there. But at the end of the day, I mean, if the fish lives its life on the bottom and you're bringing them up, and that surface temperature is 15 to 20 degrees different, they're not going to live as well.
You're still fishing the stock live well?
Yeah, fishing.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, stock live well. We keep it simple. I mean, sometimes if we get a nice herring or something, we'll throw it in a bucket of ice and keep it alive for 10 minutes. But if that herring's gonna die in the live well, I'll make him into a stick. You always just kind of gotta stay adaptive.
Now, one thing with the way you fish, the way you fight fish off the bow, so probably a trolling motor's out for you. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I've always wanted to get one on there just because of that spot lock. I mean, if you go towards south, I mean, everybody has those in Florida. It's like how they hold the bottom down there. It's just amazing. And it would be tough. I've thought about trying to get one up there, but it would make things a lot harder. It definitely would make things a lot harder. And then it just becomes, you're trying to reinvent the wheel that's rolling fine. So, I would love to put one of those on. Maybe if one of those guys, sponsored us, we'd give it a try. But back to the boat, my first set of engines, the Yamahas, we put over 3,000 hours on those, and then we got hooked up with Suzuki, and it changed the boat, completely changed the boat. Suzuki 350s with a dual prop. The boat comes out of the hole faster. It tracks straighter. So if you're, going straight and you leave the wheel for a second, my last set of engines, the boat would just start going like that. Most boats do when you leave the wheel. With those dual props, for whatever reason, it just tracks straight. So you leave the wheel for a second, it just goes, much more efficient. I get 1.2, cruising 26, 27 knots, getting 1.2,
How much fuel do you hold?
Hold 300 gallons. So, it's a lot, but we had some of those times in Chatham where, we were, down and out, not a lot of fuel. I mean, you got to right down there. That's 100 gallons. That's 100 gallons back. If you got to anchor up in the, in the cold water at night, if you don't catch a fish, there's 30 gallons back. I mean, there was one time I think I got back to Gloucester with 35 gallons in the tank. I went to pin it up through and the boat just died. And I'm like, oh, I could only idle.
Yeah, the old a third rule goes out when plans change a lot of times, especially, weather related. You end up burning more fuel than you suspect you'll burn if things kick up. That can be a challenge.
It's a great point. If you're just cruising along, the boat's not working that hard, you're cruising 1.2, but if it's rough out, you're getting 0.8, 0.9, and granted, you probably aren't going that as far on a rough day, but fuel management, it's definitely is definitely a big thing. And we're hooked up with a Schaefer oil company. So all the oils that go into the boat, they have this great, it's like a soy additive to it. So say you're putting in gasoline that's regular gasoline, you put that additive in it and it makes it up to a higher standard. So little stuff like that, it helps a long way.
Yep. Do you have, so you had mentioned that if you weren't filming, would you be running the boat or would you be on the rod? What do you prefer?
I like to be on the rod. I mean, either way, if there's someone else that, wants to be on the rod, I love to see other people enjoying. But when it comes down to it, I just have, it's my rods, my reels, my drag, my boat. I just have I have a good feel of just how to break that fish. And you've just done it so many times where I just kind of know what to do in that split second. So, I mean, I love fighting the fish, but it's nice to see someone else get up there and enjoy it as well.
Do you put more, what's the word I'm looking for? More attention on the angler fighting the fish or the captain driving the boat while fighting a fish? What's more important in that relationship to you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it's almost equal because a guy on the rod, if he, just has a brain fart for a second and the hook pulls, I mean, that's, could technically be his fault. But if the guy's on the wheel and, he's not paying attention and the fish goes that way and runs onto the boat and loses it because of, the guy driving. So it could really go either way. But they're both, equally as important to that end result. But
yeah, what is your preferred position on? Where do you want to keep that fish when you're fighting him? Walk us through a typical tuna fight and what you're hoping that captain's doing while you're on the rod to give you the best chance of beating that fish quickest.
Yeah, so, I always like to have a kind of light drag on the hook set. We're using circle hooks, so the lighter drag you have on the hook set, the better chance you have of getting a hinge. So, that first run, he's just going to go and go and go, and that's, when we take the time to get up the other rods. And what I like to do is I like to settle that. So whatever rod holder I hook up in, I usually will fight him for almost 10 minutes out of that rod holder, because there's been a lot of times where you hook up and you're just rushing to get that fish to the bow.
That's when it comes off.
And it sometimes it'll come off then, and then 10 minutes later, you'll just get a weird hook pop, and you'll be like, wait, why did that hook pop? And then you go back and you're like, maybe it wasn't really dug in when you're trying to move it up. So, that's what I'll do is, let them run for a good 10 minutes there. Once we get you can tell when that fish is all right, we got a second to move it up. So once everything's cleared, we'll move them up there. And then what I like to do is just keep the boat in neutral as much as you can and just point the engines at the fish. So if the fish is running way to the port, you keep the engines in neutral and you just turn the engines where that rod tip is going, and it's gonna act like a rudder, and it's gonna pull you over that way.
Yep.
So the more the fish can pull your boat, the more it's gonna tire him out. It's basically on a center console, it's like a huge polyball. Mm-hmm. He's pulling us around and getting tired, and the longer he goes, the more drag we put on him until one of us wins.
So what do you have your drag set at on strike?
I'm like 45.
Yeah.
40. I actually probably never really even tested one. It's more of a hand strength. I can just barely pull it out with one hand, but it's right around 40 to 45. And on a center console, I mean, you wouldn't believe you set all your drags to 45 on dot, then you'll go do 10 trips or something, and you're bouncing around, and then you'll redo your drags, and it'll be different. So it changes whether you run on a center console with the drag all the way up at strike, or if it's all the way at free spool. It'll change. That drag will rattle and change.
Really?
So I almost would check my drag pretty much every time I go out. I'll set it up to strike, and I'll just do a quick little pull, and I know that all right, that's there.
Now, are you fishing your baits below strike?
Yep. So yeah, on that hook set, I mean, it depends. If you got a J hook, you want to fish heavy drags.
Sure.
So if I know I have a J hook out there on a stick bait or something, I'll put that drag right up at strike. I mean, it's either on or it's off. But if it's a circle hook or it's a herring or something like that, I'd put it a little lower, so when he gets it, he can really run with it and let that hook kind of fetch
Find
into
its spot.
Yeah. That can be a big difference for sure.
Now, this may be a dumb question.
I love when questions. I love when questions
I love
start
to preface
this way.
one like that.
No such thing.
So if you've got a fish coming up, it looks like it's in that mid to high 70-inch range. Do you ever pass on that fish? Will you ever say I want to hook a bigger one? I know there's bigger ones here, or is it that's one we're just going to burn more expenses if we stay out here to wait for another one? So let's end the day.
Definitely. There's some of those days where it's a wide open bite, and you just know from the last couple of days, hey, these bites have been coming all day. There's bites at 9 a.m., 10, 11. And so if you have that sense where you're this bite's been all day, there's all sorts of fish rolling around. You got a 75-incher, say it's 9 a.m. and there's going to be more bites. Maybe there's a tide coming up or something. Yeah, we'll cut them right off. Or we'll be maybe I'll be thinking, he's straight up and down, and I'm thinking should we kill him? Should we not? And then he comes unbuttoned. I'm like, oh, well, it's meant to be. Or if you're down in Chatham, that's like when it really comes into effect, because there's so many smaller fish down there, and there's a lot of bigger ones too. But you go all the way down to Chatham, come back with a 73 incher. I mean, you kind of feel like a failure.
It's a harder decision to make when you're that far from home, as opposed to a little closer and knowing and having the confidence to know that if you pass on this fish, you're going to get several more bites probably, or multiple more chances.
But
very cool.
It's a fine line, because it's pretty sweet if you cut them off and you catch a bigger one. But in the circumstance where you just don't get another bite, you're like, wow, I feel pretty.
Have you
pretty
done that before?
Right
have you made that gamble and come up empty on the back end?
I think so. I mean, I think we have. I mean, we've had those times where we're looking at it and it's probably a 75 incher, and I'm just like I was saying, like, should I dart him? Should I not? And then he goes crazy and we lose, and I'm like, oh, we had that chance. And then, might not get another bite. In kind of a different respect, 2 years ago, we were down in Chatham, and, with the Wicked Tuna show, I mean, we've been neck and neck. Every year, we're in the top, like the last few seasons, we're in the top 3. So
It was a couple of years ago, you were off by like $100.
$100.
Oh,
So that was a year. The last fish, it was the last day, and it was me and Bob Cook neck and neck, and we hook a 77 incher in the tail, and it comes up completely dead. 100% dead. So that reminds me, like, I have caught dead fish. Came up completely dead, and there's cameras on the boat, and hey, I'm a karma guy. A lot of guys might cut that fish off and go for another one. I said, hey, this thing's dead. I'm not going to let it go. We went back, and that's when we ended up losing to Bob by freaking 200 pounds. If we got an 85 incher, we would have won. But we got a 75 incher dressed at 150 pounds. If we got another 50 pounds, we would have won it. But, I think that decision, hopefully that karma that I left out there on the table, hopefully it's going to come back next season.
What's your biggest fish to date?
Oh, my biggest fish was actually when I was out mackerel fishing 2 years ago. We hooked up trolling, and I never even measured him, but he was like an 850 dressed. Mm-hmm. So 1,000 pounder. We never get a full weight. So the way
the core.
Yeah, we get the core, but if it's
850 dressed.
850 dressed. Yeah, he was. That was a mean fish.
1,000 pounds.
Yeah, that was a mean fish. We had him. He was tangled in someone else's lines, both of them. He took probably. So I changed all my reels from Dacron to braid because we were having issues getting spooled. So now I get 1,200 yards on there. When I hook up, I laugh at him instead of freaking getting worried. So I had this fish a quarter mile away, and sure enough, swims under another guy's boat. He thinks he's doubled up, and it's just my fish swam into both of his lines. So that same fish, he swam into like 3 sets of long line gear or high flyer gear. So brutal. Some of them just don't want to go. We did get them. Yep.
It's amazing how you have ones where like everything goes right, it pulls the hook at the last minute, and that one sounds like everything that could have went wrong did, except he held on long enough.
Yeah, except that one right thing.
Buzzards Bay Yacht Sales knows that a great boat dealer is as important as a great boat. Why? Because new or used, you're buying a boat with 100 different systems and components that need tuning, training, troubleshooting, and sometimes repair. While most boat dealers are your best friend only until the sale is closed, Buzzards Bay Yacht Sales has developed a bulletproof reputation for building long-term relationships with their customers. Before, during, and most importantly, after the sale. Go ahead, ask around. We challenge you to find anyone who has anything but great things to say about Tom O'Toole and his team. With 6 locations from Freeport, Maine to Jupiter, Florida, including Marblehead, Massachusetts, and 3 offices on Cape Cod, Buzzards Bay Yacht Sales is committed to providing the best possible product, customer service, and support for both recreational boaters and passionate sport fishermen. It's true, who you buy from is as important as what you buy. Visit buzzardsbayyacht.com today. Do you ever think 1496 will fall?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think it will. I definitely think it will. You see some of these, as like the technology gets a little better, you know what I mean? You have more sonar, you have better, hooks coming out that are stronger. You got leader that's going down in diameter, but it's getting stronger. So I think stuff like that is going to contribute to, guys landing, 1,500 pounders. I think they're out there, but it's just one of those things where they're just not meant to be caught.
Yeah.
And you get that lucky time where, yeah, you get them. I bet you there's been plenty of them caught or hooked, but just not landed. And some of them just aren't meant to go.
Well, from an IGFA standpoint, the majority of the way that, giants are being fished, you
would be ineligible.
You might, see one break it, but it's not caught in an eligible way.
It's got to be gaffed. I don't know if it's
one
gotta be in a
angler.
chair.
One angler. It can't be. It can't be fished out of the rod holder.
That's the thing that makes it seem like that as an IGFA record might not fall, but it'd still be cool to see one bigger than that. Because you'd almost have to be looking for it. You're like, I'm out here. I'm going to look to break that record. So only one guy's touching the rod. We've got a gaff. And we had Don Petrarca on the podcast, and he goes like, you've got to be a crazy kind of person to want to put a gaff into a fish that size.
Yeah, that's...
No, I'm good.
Gosh. Yeah, that's like a couple of my North Carolina buddies. That for some reason, it's not huge to harpoon them down there. And those guys will get 100-incher up at the boat, and they'll land them with gaffs. And I'm like, that's the craziest thing I ever heard. How do you even do that? And on their side, they're looking at me and they're like, why would you harpoon it? We can get it done with gaffs. So
is there a reason they don't? Do they have a good reason for not throwing the harpoon, or just like, this is how we've always done it?
It's just how they always done it. And I even told one of my buddies, I'm like, dude, I'm going to give you a harpoon. Cause like, you guys probably know, you put a gaff in that thing and you got it up by your head like this, he swings his tail and boom, it can be dangerous.
There's a lot that can go wrong in both scenarios, but I mean, to subdue a fish that big, taking the harpoon
I'm taking the harpoon just to get another line in it. You just so many times where he's right at the boat, and that's when everything can go wrong. So it's like, you get a shot on him, just get another line.
The end game's the best.
Oh yeah.
Have you fished down in the Carolinas for tuna?
Yeah.
What are the biggest differences between how you fish, and explain that to how they fish down there?
So yeah, it's a lot of trolling. I went down there, after college. Like I said, I was just looking for time.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for stuff to fill in the time. So I'd fish all season, and then December, January, February would come around, and I hadn't found dragging yet. They closed lobstering in the wintertime because of right whales. So I'd go down there and jump on a boat. I had buddies from New York that were down there, and actually the first year that I went, I didn't know anybody down there, not a soul. Friend of a friend, Dean Lambros, he
Canyon runner.
Yeah, Canyon Dean, he we'll laugh about it now, but he put me on a boat that he probably knew I wasn't going to last on, with a captain that just maybe didn't have mates that stood a long time on his boat. And that was my introduction to North Carolina fishing. I was on the Allison, one of the best fishermen down there, but just notoriously hard to work for. And I said, I had no idea. Dean was like, yeah, go fish with this guy. I'm like, all right, I'll give it my best. But that was all green stick fishing. We were fishing the green stick, and it was one hell of a thrill. So
yeah.
For giants?
For giants, yeah. So in North Carolina, you're either fishing a green stick or you're trolling ballyhoos. Or if it's at night, you're going to drop down a bait. So there's three technically scenarios. And the green stick boats are just dragging around, their green stick, usually 4 to 6 drops. And, they'll find those fish and they'll shoot up from 1,000 feet and hit that stick.
Wow.
And that, that first year I was with Jimmy, that we had some cool bites. And that's when I learned, when you're jigging the stick, you got to take your hand off.
Fingers.
Yeah, because when that thing breaks, that clip comes back about as fast as you can imagine. But yeah, seeing those fish, right behind the boat, 100-incher jump out of the water, and the squid as you're, jigging them down is a rush, man.
It is. It's cool. Do you see that being an effective technique on the bank when they're kind of keyed into, the squid bars and stuff? Like, is there a reason why guys don't do it here? I know they do it out in our canyons, but I've never heard of anybody trying it on Stellwagen. Maybe they have.
There's been a couple guys that have tried, and it's never really caught on. My friend Sam Law that I mentioned before in the Kraken, he set up a squid, he set up his whole long line or his green stick setup, and he would fish right off the beach of, Plum Island, because every evening those fish would come in and they'd blow up on the pogies. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to be like, a pogie on the surface is the same as a squid. So, for whatever reason, it's not as, prevalent up here. But in North Carolina, the guys started to figure out that the bites that were coming on the stick and the bites were coming on the ballyhoo were different fish. So like if you're getting a stick bite, it would most of the time be a smaller fish. And the guys that were trolling ballyhoo would get those 500-pound dressers that usually wouldn't come up and hit a stick.
Okay.
So, it kind of transitioned down there to less guys pulling the stick and more guys pulling ballyhoo because it's cheaper. It's a lot easier. And, you have a chance of getting, a bigger fish. There have been times down there I was fishing with my buddy Pat Butera on the Forever Two Worlds, and we quadded up. It's if anyone, if you guys ever get the chance, that is a fishery where it just has to be experienced, but it comes at a cost, man. Rest in peace, Charlie Griffin just passed away there less than a week ago.
Yeah.
So
I saw that. That's crazy.
That's where it transitions from the best fishing you've ever seen, the most fun you've ever had into your life, to a situation where you might not be making it home. So, those guys are some of the best seamen, some of the best captains in the world are able to get in and out of that inlet in that rough weather is not easy.
That's what happened. That was an inlet accident, right?
Yeah, or Oregon Inlet. So if you want to go fishing out of, Wanchese there and you want to go, to where everyone goes, you got to get through the Oregon Inlet. And, it is nasty. It's about like a mile long of just breaking water and shallow. Mm-hmm. So, we've had times where if you're going out, you're taking the waves on. So you're guys are blowing out, windshields, roofs are coming off. When you're coming back in, that's even more dangerous because, you're getting in between a set and you're surfing down through that set.
To bookend every trip with that kind of that experience.
Scary, man.
The toughest we have to deal with is what, Muskeget?
We have Muskeget.
Up here, New England harbors are generally pretty, I guess you have some up.
Some of the inlets down south are pretty gnarly.
Yes.
I remember one of the years where they did the north versus south on Wicked Tuna, Marciano's first time dealing with that. And luckily, the fishing community is a brotherhood and they work together, but it was like, you take somebody that has so much experience on the water and it's like, I got this, whatever. And it's like, you find yourself in some shit real
the lion's
quick.
Den.
Yeah.
And down there, there's like a 3-headed monster. You got to get out from the harbor. You got to get to the bridge, which is all shallow and it's all oyster
was where
beds.
he got in trouble.
The bridge is, you got to go under these sections of the bridge and the depth of each section changes every day because there's sand coming in and out. So you might go through the third section on Monday, by Wednesday, you're going through and all of a sudden, it's 4 feet. You hit the bottom and there's 5 knots of tide ripping out of there. And that's what happened to Marciano. You get hit with that tide. So if you're lucky enough to make it through the bridge, then you got to go out through the inlet, and that's where it gets really dangerous. But incredible fishing that they have down there, and there's more and more every year. You can just tell by the quota it gets eaten up. Back 10 years ago, the quota would go until it would start back up in June up here, but now it's done by Valentine's Day every year because of how incredible the fishing is.
So your first time down there, you just showed up and did you grab a place? Like you just
we lived on the boat. It was one of those things where I was just like,
I'm doing this.
I'm going to do it. And went down there. I met Jimmy in Ocean City. We ran the boat from Ocean City down to Wanchese, and we were there. We were living on the boat. Luckily, guys that I had never met before just wandered down the dock my age, and they had a house. And, a good friend, Pat Butera and Kyle Colasanti, hey, we got a house. If you got, I was looking like I probably needed a shower. And they're like, hey, buddy, like, if you need a shower, you got to do some laundry, you can come over, and that kind of sparked a great friendship that to this day is still pretty prevalent.
Did you bring any of their techniques back home?
Yeah, that's the beauty of fishing with some of those other guys. Some of the guys out in New York are really some of the best fishermen around that fish the canyon, fish the inshore, and just seeing how they trolled, how they were rigging their ballyhoos, split billing, the types of leader they were using. They're using different crimps than I was. So I got to see of this like kind of other way of getting it done. I had only really fished with myself and a couple other captains, but to see, someone else go through and do that. And I learned a lot, just captainship, getting through that inlet, how to read an inlet. So if it's screaming out, you just don't go through the inlet on an outgoing tide, because when that tide rips out, it creates that rip effect. So like you would learn to hit that that inlet at like the perfect time. And it was always a little different, say if your tide chart says, you want to go through there at 7 a.m. and 7 a.m. it's still rolling, you got to know like, oh, it's going to be done by 7:20. And just learning a lot of captainship and other techniques was really beneficial.
That's pretty wild.
In deep dropping, I mean, so if you didn't catch a fish during the day, you'd drive around at night. You'd find the pile of fish. You couldn't miss them. It looked like a bottom, false bottom. And you take a mackerel, you'd rig her up, flutter style, and you'd put it right down there, and it was just like as instant as it could be. How
deep? How deep was the water?
I mean, we're fishing in the canyon, so you're in like 1,500, 2,000 feet of water, and you would just see basically just in the middle of the water column, you would just see checks, thousands of them, and like you'd be dropping the bait down and just like laughing, and that was what some of those New York guys, they kind of pioneered that. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, the North Carolina guys, they'd troll all day, but if they didn't get one at night, they'd just go home. And then the northern guys came down, the down east boats, they went out there, they didn't catch them during the day, they're in slow down east boats, so they're like, we're staying the night, we're not gonna, if you got a sport boat, you're running in and out quickly, 30 knots. But if you're going 10 knots on a commercial boat, you're not going to go back in if you don't catch one. So those guys kind of, pioneered a cool, style of fishing down there.
That's pretty cool.
It was neat to be a part of.
I know they do that in California. The nighttime deep water bites big out there on the Pacific.
The thing that blew me away there is they were like, we don't really have a jig bite during the day. It's only at night. And it was like, wait, what?
Because that's the way they describe it was just what you said. They find them in deep water. They're all stacked up, and they'll eat jigs, 400 feet down.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound fun.
No, yeah,
if it's not electric. But yeah, and in deep water, those fish are just staying down. They don't want to come up during the day. And at nighttime, once that light goes out, they have more of a realm to go up and down. But yeah, North Carolina, that's a fun fishery up there. And then I started doing the dragon up here. Luckily, I had to just kind of, it's tough, going down North Carolina with my girlfriend and whatnot. It's like, you're going away and you're out, and it's nice to transition to something that's a little closer to home.
Yeah, it keeps you home year round.
Yeah, I like that for sure.
So the new season of Wicked Tuna kicked off earlier in March, and how long is that going to run?
Yeah, so new season 13, Sunday, March 3rd, it aired, and so now we got 12 episodes this year, and which is a little bit of a cut down from last year. We had 15, but 12 just action-packed episodes. So it's every Sunday night, 8, 9 Central on National Geographic, and the later it gets into the season, it was a very, very exciting season to film. And I think the product that we're going to deliver is really going to make some people happy. And on that tangent, I'm following the ratings of the show, and it's out of 600 shows on Sunday night prime time, which is kind of the biggest night for, if you look at HBO shows or what it's prime time, and they're getting 30s and 40s out of 600. So that's big numbers for a show that's in its 13th season.
That's where it's impressive. It's no longer new, And you guys are gearing up to film in 2024?
Yeah, we're geared up. We'll be ready to go. Start in July, and it's been a hell of a ride. I'm just very thankful that it's basically in the right time at the right place, and just was lucky to get the opportunity. I'm just riding the wave.
Very cool. How can people find you for your charter business if they're looking to book a charter with you?
Yeah, so charter online. You can get me on Instagram, Time Flies Charters, or on Facebook, Time Flies Charters. I got a website, timefliescharters.com.
Awesome.
Any of those platforms, and I'd love to. I love getting people out in the water, and it really is. It's really rewarding for me to see somebody out there have a fun time, and then you get down the road where you bump into somebody that you haven't seen in a few years, and they're telling you how much fun they had on that day and how much it meant to them, and you're like, to me, like, I barely remember it, but to the person that came with me, it really was
that's cool.
a big experience. So to me, that's the
it's hard to remember every single day when you're spending most days on the water.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was fun talking tuna with you and getting to know a little bit more about your journey. So appreciate you coming on with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it, guys.
Awesome.